The Isle of Man General Election 2021 coverage on Manx Radio.
Good evening. We're live at the Viking in Castletown tonight for the first of our constituency chats around the campfire. Arbory, Castletown and Malew for the House of Keys general election on September 23rd. May I remind you that's 3 weeks tomorrow. The constituency of Arbory, Castletown and Malew covers a large area in the south of the Isle of Man. It is made up of local authority areas sharing the same names. It also includes part of East Rushen, part of the former constituencies of Rushen and Malew and Santon, along with the island's ancient capital, Castletown, which is where we are tonight. And tonight, I'm with Graham Crageen and Steve Crowther and Tim Glover and Jason Morehouse. We're here to hear what they have to say to the constituents in Arbory, Castletown and Malew. First of all, I want to go to Steve Crowther. Steve Crowther, why do you want to become an MHK?
Well, I don't know about the time I've got, but just very quickly, I studied at Castle Rushen. I studied architecture in Manchester, and the fundamentals to me were my international travel. And I believe right now our constituency had a great legacy to start, and we've lost momentum at the current time. That's why I'm here.
Now, you were involved in infrastructure in the Far East, was it?
Yeah, I was Hong Kong, Thailand.
What did you
China.
build?
Well, I didn't build myself. Quite a few projects, really. Airports, particularly transport infrastructure was my
What do you think of
field.
the bypass in Ballasalla?
A great opportunity. Unfortunately, I'll come to this in a minute, we've lost momentum again. And again, the big worry for me is that at the moment we don't have a strategic review. So at the moment we have what I would call a postage stamp review of a simple junction, which has now become very complicated.
Tim Glover, why do you want to be an MHK?
I've been on the periphery of politics, obviously, with my job in the newsroom at Manx Radio for 24 years. I've become frustrated with what I'm seeing, and you've got a choice then, haven't you? You can either decide to try and get involved, become a player, or you continue to shouting from the sidelines. I think I can achieve a lot more being involved and represent the people of Arbory, Castletown and Malew.
If there's one thing that gets your goat then about Arbory, Castletown, Malew, one thing that you think, is burning inside that should be put right, what is it? What do you think?
I think people don't feel any better off than they did 5 years ago, and I think we've had wasted opportunities. I can think of the technology gateway at the airport. It's still exactly as it was 5 years ago and was a big constituency and island concern at the time. Nothing has happened. That's the frustration that I'm getting from the people knocking on doors, and I share.
Jason Morehouse, do you feel better about the position that you held up until a couple of weeks ago than you did when you got elected?
Definitely, I've learned a lot, I've enjoyed it, and I've got many skills I've refined hugely.
Okay, so what do you think this constituency needs to move it forward?
It needs someone who's going to actually be there to push, to ask the questions and ensure that Arbory, Castletown and Malew are always at the table and always getting the key push that they require.
Okay, what do you think about the economic well-being of this constituency?
I think there's huge potential here. We're in a good location. We've got the airport here. The airport technology gateway is hopefully on the verge of shifting forward. There was $2 million allocated to it in the 2019 budget. It's been held back by COVID, and we're really in probably one of the best locations in the world. And when people find out about this location, they come here, they're amazed.
Graham Crageen, if you're successful, that will be 20 years.
Well,
yeah, I mean, you've been an MHK for how long now?
15.
Okay, so when you started as an MHK, what were the burning things inside you? What did you want to do for the constituency? Of course, different constituency. It's been merged now.
Yes, well, I've always been part of community. I was brought up in Port St Mary as part of Port St Mary Lifeboat, Russian Emergency Ambulance, moved into Ballasalla. And during my time, I've never been one of those people who sit back if they don't think it's right and do nothing. I've always gone out and done things. And when I stood for election in 2006, one of my big concerns was that we'd been in a situation where we'd been having lots of schemes, government was spending money, and there was quite a lot of money that was going through. And you always think, well, one day this is going to end, and we needed to put something in there to try and back that up just in case we have a downturn. Unfortunately, a couple of years into that, we had the VAT. We lost £200 million a year off income. And through my time in Parliament, we're still adjusting all the way through that. And of course, now we've had the global COVID pandemic, and we've spent possibly best part of 280 million trying to deal with that. And that will also have a knock-on effect because we're still trying to rebalance. And how are we going to keep those finances, especially with the uncertainty in the world at the moment?
The difficult thing to sync, obviously, is as a constituency MHK, and obviously if an MHK then gets ministerial responsibility, is there a danger you lose touch with your constituency?
I don't think so, because during my time as Minister for Education, a lot went forward. We've pushed forward with the new Castle Rushen High School, and there was lots of pressures through Treasury who kept on trying to knock the budget down, and we were trying to justify why we needed a swimming pool, the theatre, an indoor sports, or all the modern facilities that a new school should have, rather than just a steel portal frame. And we, for constituents on low incomes, we brought in a maintenance grant to help those people go to university. So you're able to do things for your constituents. I chair the Balthain User Group, and the amount of work that's gone on down in Balthain, we've got 100 plus businesses down there. So you're always trying to do that, and I've helped a number of businesses in Castletown.
With respect, the Balthain Industrial Estate remains an industrial estate. It's not a business park. It looks like, parts of it look like a tip. So to make that, I remember years ago there was going to be, do you remember the Airport Innovation Centre, the Enterprise Zone? We had De Beers there as well. And now Balthain Industrial Estate's got some very dedicated workers there and hard-working businesses. It just doesn't look very nice.
Well, part of that is that you need to get the road infrastructure. When you go down, and previously, before I got involved, there was derelict cars everywhere. You had the scrap heap there. You also had paper recycling that was blowing all over the place. So all those businesses have now gone. The area's being tied up. So it's working with businesses and also trying to work with local authorities, because all these things have to be funded.
Steve Crowther, what would you do to smarten up Balthain?
Good, thanks. I've got a bit of opportunity here. Look, the fundamentals is we're talking about tidying up and moving cars. Let's stand back for a minute and have a look at the bigger picture. The key problem here is this constituency. When we pulled it all together and combined the two, we had a real opportunity. And I believe that the two incumbents had a real legacy. New school that was in the Pink Book. We had an opportunity for a new technology gateway, and fundamentally we had an opportunity for new housing. We've lost all three. They're buried. At the moment, the schools are nearly mothballed.
No, it's not.
It is mothballed. Great, it is mothballed. Great. Well, are we going to have this banter all night?
Okay. No, that's okay.
Or are we going to move on? I'm going to get a chance to speak.
Well, your opinion is it's mothballed, okay?
Well, it is, because there's no plan.
Okay.
There's no school.
Okay, anyway, the housing. Lots of housing.
Where?
Ballasalla?
Yeah, Ballasalla, but that scheme was planned significantly.
Just behind here, there are 36 houses?
Yes, there are.
90.
And interesting is that when the Southern Plan was reviewed in 2011, the inspector advised there was no significant first-time buyer housing. Interestingly, particularly because of Graham's democracy at Dandara, we've now nothing down there, and we've nothing in the new development here. We all know there isn't going to be any first-time buyer housing. Exactly why I've made the effort.
Why isn't there going to be any first-time buyer housing?
Because the current legislation means that the developer at the moment can sell en bloc the affordable homes to buy to let, and that's exactly what we've got at the moment. We haven't got any homes for first-time buyers. That's exactly why I've put all the effort into finding something that will work.
Tim Glover, have you you've been walking around the entire constituency? Have you come across people moaning about first-time buyers?
Affordable housing and first-time buyers is the biggest topic that is coming up on the doorstep, apart from COVID, but it is the biggest.
Is this by younger people or their parents who want them out of the house?
It's all age groups. It's looking after their children and their grandchildren. They don't see a way out. People in the estates are wanting to move out but see it's unaffordable at the moment, and it's a massive issue that's got to be addressed very early on in the next administration. If you go back to 2010 and 11, 86 people were helped out with first-time buyers through the government scheme. 2019 to 20, it was 19. There are just over 50 first-time buyer homes planned for the next year. It's not enough to meet the expectations that are out there.
Jason Morehouse, you were a teacher for how long at Castle Rushen?
Over 20 years.
Okay, so a lot of your potential voters will have been taught by you and will be wanting to buy houses. How can we reconnect with first-time buyers and give them a foot on the ladder?
Yeah, I think it's a really important issue. I brought a motion in January that was successful, and since then there's been this slow movement forward. I asked again in June where the information was, what was happening, and last week the Infrastructure Minister came forward with something which was pretty basic, but it was something that allows us to talk about the best solution going forward. We were in a situation last month where we had over 50 candidates going around the island saying this is an important issue, but there was no consistency in terms of what we were looking for.
There'll be parents listening to this who've got their children living at their house at the moment. Those children want to buy. They earn a decent wage. There's negative unemployment on the Isle of Man. People with a good education can get work, and sometimes very well paid work. But we can't seem to break that chain so that they can get a foot on the ladder and they watch people buying multiple properties to let.
There is a rumour that multiple properties are being bought to let, but in terms of getting the evidence from the land registry and getting the evidence from the builders and other people, it's a tough call, that one. But the key problem is, and the key problem is that remains, is that there's an issue in terms of availability.
Graham, could
can I just finish up, please? Yeah. In terms of availability, we need to plug that gap, because until young people can get a home, they're not going to be happy staying on the island. They look for alternatives.
Yeah, as part of many developments, even the ones behind us here, there have to be 25% of affordable housing.
But they're not affordable.
Exactly. They go part of the government affordable housing scheme, which they go through, which they goes through the system. So even in Ballasalla and behind us here, there will be affordable housing. One of the issues we've got is that with the current rise in prices and materials and everything else, the scheme needs to be adapted, because some of this joint equity that we have is probably too low at the moment with the current prices, so we now need to up that. Regarding Castle Rushen High School, I was in touch with the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. They are still looking for a completion date for Castle Rushen High School, 27-28.
Is the money there to do it?
It's in the pink book, ready to go. So and like anything,
it's not ready to go.
When you've got something in the pink book, any capital scheme still has to go to Tynwald for overall approval. So it doesn't matter.
Where's the plans?
So the plans are getting drawn up when they've completed.
Well, I'm an architect, Graham, and I can tell you how long that'll take.
Yes.
It's about another 5 years, Graham, before you could even suggest that something.
But unfortunately, you may not know that the department has been working with people. They've already got preliminary designs, so that final planning will be going in. They're talking about a 3-year build, so that's why they're looking at.
So the timetable from, let's just say, next Monday, it was approved. It could be another 5 years.
So before it's completed.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a 3-year bill.
So that could be 2026.
If it gets approved. And I understand probably now. Graham told us 3 years ago at the parents' evening that the bill would be roughly 45 million. It's no problem, he would get that approved with Treasury. Problem is now, I believe that project is probably between 60 to 70.
It'll have increased with the cost of material.
Now we've got to put all the. Do you think Treasury are going to do that in the next month? I don't think so.
What state is Castle Rushen High School in?
It's terrible. I can't even. And the worst part is the pool. Let's look where we are.
Well, that's a public pool.
Well, no, it is, but it's tied to the school.
It is, but
public pool.
Members of the public use that as well.
And where's that going?
So you're saying it's in bad condition?
Appalling. Actually, to tell you the truth, the floor's bad. The boilers are in a terrible state. Graham knows all this. And because he's trying to put it into the new school and pushed, we've now ended up with no school at all. And the result is that we've got a guy who used to teach there and a minister used to be in education, and we've got nothing. And let me go to the fundamentals here. If we have a look at the technology park, all of this works together. So we've now got a constituency with just loose parts that isn't pulling. This is the key question.
Okay, Tim Glover, in terms of paying for all this, and if the economy in the south, and we're talking about Arbory, Castletown, Malew, has to move forward, how can we create more jobs?
Government needs to be far less clunky and a lot more efficient. I've spoken to businesses that are wanting to set up business in the south. There's a children's television film producer. It's steady work. They're on 3 productions at a time. They're wanting to bring 100 jobs to the south of the island.
Is this to the airport or to Ronaldsway?
It'll be into Castletown, right. But they have been asking government now for some of the promises that were made from Enterprise to come to fruition, and they've been asking now for about 1.5 to 2 years. Nothing has happened. Government is too slow.
We get phone calls all the time on
Man in Line
from people saying we're a rich island, we're one of the richest islands in the world, pro rata. We've had non-stop growth since 1984. Why can't government connect with people and projects to make things happen? Other places do it. How long did they take to build the new airport in Hong Kong?
Quite a while, actually, but it was a new island. They did have to use nearly 1/3 of the Earth's, the world's dump.
From the time they started, how long was it?
About 7 years, I think.
It's 2 years longer than Castle Rushen High School. That is. Yeah. Going back to jobs in the south of the island, Tim Glover, do you think everybody's, and this is a point about travel, the government talks about restricting the carbon footprint. So if we bring jobs to Castletown, Arbory, and Castletown and Malew, that'll surely help that. So shouldn't that be a priority to get jobs, meaningful, well-paid jobs in the south?
And that's why we need 2 MHKs who are going to be campaigning and shouting and raising the flag for Arbory, Castletown and Malew to bring jobs down here. We've got a golden opportunity with a load of businesses that are wanting to be based down in the south. Another business I've spoken to is wanting to relocate to the airport, Freeport there. 2.5 years he's been waiting for an answer. It's not acceptable. Government needs to move in a far more, it's hindering rather than helping at the moment.
I want to talk about education.
Go elsewhere
now.
If they don't get
answers.
Jobs come from education, and our young people often leave the Isle of Man and never come back.
Because they can't afford a house.
Mr. Morehouse, what can we do to make sure that our youngsters who go to university come back, get a decent job and get a house?
I think the priority is actually going back to the housing situation, but also the range of activities for them. There's a major issue in terms of that provision, and until we get the investment by private companies and we actually get the housing, local people are going to look across. And
what do you mean by range of activities?
Because you've still got a situation where, in terms of the things that young people are looking for, we're quite limited.
Fun.
Yeah, fun. Yeah.
So, what, nightclubs, gyms?
Well, yeah, just in terms of the range of resources, because these young people have been at big cities across, they've been at big universities, and they've expectations. And in terms of the island, we're not going to match that head on, but in terms of the basics, we need to ensure that they can afford to live here in a decent home and build up relationships and put down roots again and live happily here.
Do you think the education that children receive on the Isle of Man is good enough?
It's dependent on which children you're looking at. There's always the issue in terms of making sure that every child reaches their full potential. And I would argue that in the past...
Do you mean the clever ones will succeed and the other ones fall by the wayside?
Yeah, and in terms of the last 5 years, we needed to be investing more to ensure there's enough support and those children all reach their full potential. There's also been an issue in terms of COVID, in terms of actually ensuring that every child has had those opportunities. And it's been difficult for the children, the schools and the teachers, but the education has moved forward and learnt a lot from that.
Okay, Mr. Crogene, you were in that department, Education, Sport and Culture, for more than a while as well. Is it good enough going forward?
No. And one of the issues that we've always had is recruitment of teachers. And when you're looking at trying to bring people over here, some of the facilities that we had, like in Castle Rushen, which is why we've tried to push it along, is to try and attract teachers here to new builds. Because you want a proper environment for the teachers to be in, and also the people to learn. So we've actually got to move that along. We did work with St Thomas's. We moved them up to Valaghild. We did some work on St Mary's School. So a lot of the schools were getting investment. But what you also have to realise is, like we touched on earlier, is that the funding for all these has to come from somewhere.
Yes.
And, you know, what services are we actually going to have to look at? And, you know, the money is tight.
Do we have to pay teachers more to come to the Isle of Man?
Well, that's what we offered them. We offered them London Fringe to actually come here and for our local people, but unfortunately that was turned down. We'd offered an additional £6,000 from 24,000 to 30,000 for new teachers coming in into the profession, but that was turned down as well.
Steve Crowther, so did you live in Hong Kong?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
For quite
Well,
a
we're talking about Mr. Morehouse was talking about. Let me just move on to this for a moment. Talking about facilities. You lived in Hong Kong. Yeah. Now that's a very snazzy place to live.
Well, it isn't at the moment.
Well, not at the
it
moment.
was at the time. Yeah. Okay.
But how do we make the Isle of Man, if you like, as Mr. Morehouse said, more fun for young people?
It's not just about fun, is it? I mean, we always classify young people as just, you know, going out for a laugh. Actually, they're really focused today very heavily on, you know, the education process. But fundamentally, let's have a look at this constituency. We have this opportunity for a technology gateway. It's sat doing nothing for 5 years. For me, right now, fortunately, we have a new opportunity. The new Eco House hybrid that we've developed offers us an opportunity to develop on the island a new climate change research park. And I would like to position that opposite the airport. This gives us what we're looking for is the high-skilled jobs. That's what we need in this constituency. That's the future. That's the vision that we need to go forward. And I think if people can see that, if young people can see where we want to go, and that hinges particularly around the biosphere and other things that you know, at the moment, if you ask most young people, they don't relate to it. If I ask most people in the room, they probably won't relate to it.
What does the biosphere mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you what it's described as, and I'd like to bring that out, actually, a great opportunity. The UNESCO Biosphere is about our entire culture, not just, you know, flora and trees. It's actually about us. And actually, it really does offer, if used properly, a real potential to show investors our integrity, where we want to go, what we want to deliver. And I believe that young people, if they can see that, if they understand where we're going, if we're clear, you know, and Tim's mentioned joined up government, and it always sounds like they're all holding hands, actually, but the reality is it's making sure there's a little bit of an element of executive that stops, you know, some of the nonsense between departments, and that we look as if we're strategic.
Tim Glover, in government, there are elected members and there are officials, some of them very senior officials, paid a lot more than the people who are elected by the people. How does an elected member get their will through over senior civil servants who may not agree?
You've got to win arguments. You've got to bring other politicians along and build momentum and pressure for things to go through. But can I just return to housing, as I didn't really get a chance to
very quickly
put some positive points across there and what we can do. Government owns a lot of land, a lot of brownfield sites. Why aren't we selling plots like we have done in the past? Ballalot, just down the road here, over School Hill, it was built that way. A plot was sold and then you built your own house.
Well,
that's a cheaper way of doing it.
Exactly. School site, that offered the best chance. Lost.
The rental side of things, affordable housing should not be your first-time buyer housing, and there is a difference, because the interpretation of affordable is not what the public see as affordable. It's first-time buyer houses that we need to be focusing on, but affordable housing in all of these schemes should not be rented out and should not be bought by multiple ownerships.
Do you think government should bring in a law? Tynwald's very nimble, it can bring in a law when it wants. Do you think they should bring in a law to say that somebody can only have a certain number of properties for buy-to-let?
I think that you start to tax people more on ownership of multiple properties. So, for example, a second house that's bought, 10%, a third house, 20%. It has to be limiting that opportunity for people, because at the moment, people with money are seeing the only way to get a return with interest rates so low is to go into property. But at the same time, that's having a knock-on effect for our youngsters who will leave this island, and I've heard of several that are planning to go as well. If we lose our youngsters, we're losing our potential professionals and teachers, doctors, nurses and any other profession that you want to bring people into, and where we're short at the moment, we're not going to be able to do that from people within the Isle of Man. We've got to make the Isle of Man an attractive place for our youngsters and affordable for them to get onto the property market.
Okay.
I've heard of 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds that are still living with their parents because they cannot see the light of day of ever getting on the property ladder.
Jason Morehouse, do you talk to, 16-year-olds can vote. When was the last time you spoke to a 16-year-old on the doorstep?
About 2 hours ago. Yeah, it's one thing I've tried to keep local links, and I've gone into local schools on a regular basis. I've been heavily involved with Junior Achievement. I think it's important that all people in the constituency have got access to their MHK.
How important do you think then that young people get onto the ladder, get a job, and then contribute to society? Because I want to come to antisocial behaviour and how we combat that on the Isle of Man. There's been a rise lately of antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, I think we're in a good place, and there's always been a very small group of individuals. You can take them in any age, and those individuals don't carry out their lives as we would perhaps expect, and there's a backlash, there are issues. But the majority of young people are incredible. They're so motivated, they're fulfilling their dreams, whatever it might be, and we really need to be patting them on the back and saying, well done. You know, that the problems that we've seen in areas like Onken are hopefully just one-offs and a small group of individuals. There are thousands of young people across the island who are doing this proud every single day of the week, and they're special, they make the island special.
Okay, I want to talk about poverty on the Isle of Man. I want to talk about the underclass and the people that we don't often talk about, Steve Crowther, and getting the economy working for people and breaking a cycle of dependency from people who come from families that don't see any point in achievement, and that just goes on.
Actually, just going back again to, I'm sorry to revolve around a housing issue, but it does illustrate a point. You see, so if we, we're probably talking about areas of social housing here. And one thing that I can measure is that, a lot of people assume that some people are in social housing, perhaps have a nice car on the driveway, and there's a belief that, they're sort of exploiting the system. The real truth is right now that at the moment, nobody can get a house. They can't get out of that situation in social housing. Unless you talk to a lot of people, which is exactly what we're doing right now, you really feel the measure of that. So at the moment, there is a real chance, I think I've got a great system and others to, really help people to move. You see, if you can see one or two people who can't get a mortgage, very, very difficult on the Isle of Man, they're stuck in this rut, and if they can get out of that, it would actually help the social housing, free up some space. Some people get their first house, and that does change the whole poverty cycle if we can begin to work on it.
Graham Kajin, has this changed over your tenure?
There's been changes in there, like we were talking earlier about the schemes that government have brought forward. But like I said earlier, that material prices has gone up, the total cost of housing has gone up. And I think what government has to do in the next administration is actually look at maybe loan guarantees, because we've done that over the COVID period for businesses. We need to increase possibly the equity share. And one thing that I've always been advocate for is, say, the land up in Ballasalla, which is government land, is actually having that buy to build. So you can actually go down that line, so that you're not having to just go to the big builders and have their houses, but it's also sort of giving people the opportunity. And the other one that's going to be coming in is the infrastructure levy. Now, part of that infrastructure levy could be used for, if you're looking at, say, Castletown, that young people could go into those properties and get a grant from government to do up old properties, which would be really helpful.
Do you think there are more poor people on the Isle of Man than there were when you first came in 2006?
I think there's the aspirations of people have moved on as well. And, so far we're lucky that we haven't got people begging on the streets, but we still have a lot of people who are sofa surfing that haven't got anywhere to go. And what worries me is that in the future we're going to have serious mental health issues from people who have nowhere to go.
Okay, we're live tonight at the Viking in Castletown. I'm Andy Wint, and with the constituents and also the candidates who are vying for the two MHK positions in Arbory, Castletown and Malew. The constituents in Arbory, Castletown and Malew give the two MHKs a 5-year contract to do their best. We're with Graham Crageen, Jason Morehouse, Tim Glover and Steve Crowther. And by the way, there are pre-election meetings as well. This is a special Manx radio programme from the Viking. There's a pre-election meeting tomorrow at Arbory Primary School from 7 till 9. Next Tuesday the 7th at Castletown Community Hall, and on Wednesday the 15th at Ballasalla Primary School. And I just may say, tomorrow night Manx Radio is out and about, and we're with Eyre and Michael at the Ginger Hall in Sulby. Right, we'll go to the audience now in the Viking. Anybody here with a question? We have microphones out and about. Everybody's been watching terribly politely here as well. Anybody? Oh, there's a lady here. Yes, your name is?
Angela.
Angela, your question, please?
Given a lot of the talk has been about lack of skilled people on the island, whether it be security people at Ronaldsway, tradesmen at Dandara, doctors, nurses, dentists, what would be your stance if the island was asked to bring in, Afghan refugees? Okay,
Jason Morehouse.
I think this is a tough decision. I think in the first instance, though, we need to be making money available because those people are really in a difficult position. In terms of them coming to the island, we need to actually look at what facilities we've got available. At the moment, we've got real pressure in areas such as mental health, in terms of housing, as we've heard, in terms of all those key support areas that these people would need. So I think it needs to be considered, and we need to look at the options and the possibilities, but we can't rush into it. But in the short term, there should be some funding to ensure they are being looked after and have a decent standard of living.
If suddenly we were offered 5 Afghan refugees, would it be a good idea to accept them?
I think it would be difficult given the current pressures we've got.
Tim
we
Glover.
couldn't just turn away without thinking about it.
Tim Glover.
I think Jason is right. The infrastructure is creaking and groaning here on the Isle of Man, as has been asked in the question there. But I think we're better than that. We're meant to be an affluent society as well. I think if we just took a family that was going to offer skill sets to the island, that sets a good example. We've got to do it proportionally for the very reasons you've said, but I think we're better than just saying, let's just send some money into nowhere.
Graham Crageen.
I think you're assuming that we will be given an option about which refugees that we'll actually take. And so, you know, like Jason said, the advice that the government has previously been given is that the money that we send helps thousands of refugees. And you know what we've seen across the health service at the moment, even for our own people, we are struggling to have mental health professionals. There's 3 mental health professionals in the police service, and that's it. And you've got to have the infrastructure and support in place for these people, because it's not going to be that easy to integrate one family. They need a support mechanism around them.
Steve Crowther.
I think, look, you know, we're playing politics here, aren't we? The issue is that this is, you know, we're an international jurisdiction. I think we need to show humanity. I understand that. I think the key thing is, though, that we must make sure that, you know, whenever you take people on board, you really do have to resource that properly. It's not just a case of taking somebody in for the sake of it.
Okay, and the lady there, what's your response?
Yes, I just referring to what Jason said, we're needing housing and things, but we do need people to come to the island, and wherever they come from, they're going to need housing, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, definitely in terms of that, but we need to actually look at what we can offer at this moment in time. We can't rush into things. I was in Sheffield in the early 90s studying, and they brought a small community there, and it wasn't done well, and there were major issues. So anything we do needs to be taken, we need to look at the full issues, but in the first instance there needs to be immediate support.
Do you think we should accept Afghan refugees?
I just think that it'll never happen, but if we were in that situation, I would hope a country would take me in.
Okay, any other questions from the floor here? Yes? Sorry sir, your name is?
Will.
Will, and what's your question?
Housing. We seem to talk a lot about housing and the problem with housing. And I feel that a lot of the problem is due to the pension funds buying into the houses on the Isle of Man. And I think we need to restrict what they can actually buy into. So, for example, at the moment, I think you can't get mortgages on the Isle of Man, unless it's over 150,000 to protect the first-time buyers. But in reality, you can't get a house on the Isle of Man for 150,000. So it needs to be up to 400,000, I think, to protect the first-time buyers. That's, I think
Steve Crowther.
Well, that's a great question for me. Look, yeah, exactly correct. That is the problem. Just two quick answers. I know with time. One of the key factors is you can't get mortgages on the Isle of Man because of repossession laws. It does actually cause a lot of problems. So it is a challenge, and we are stuck in this cycle. Interestingly, that's exactly why I've spent the last 5 years helping an entrepreneur develop a true eco-hybrid system that allows a 4-bedroom house for 180k. That's exactly why I'm here, because we need the legislation that allows us to deliver that through developers, the big carrot rather than the stick.
How much did it sell for, though? I think you need to say
yeah,
that.
Absolutely.
It's sold for over 400,000, hasn't it?
It's sold for only 400,000. That's the differential. But we can sell them for that. A developer can sell them for that, and that's the key.
Okay, Graham Craigie.
I think what we've got is we've got a number of employers over here as well who are trying to attract staff over here, and the only way they can do them is that they've bought up a number of houses and then they rent them out to their staff, and that's been causing the issue with them. One of the things that we can do is actually put some additional cost in land registration fee. So if it's your second, your third and your fourth house, you then increase the cost of that registration, and then you can use that money, but you've still got a problem that people are seeing that you've got no returns in the bank. It's about 1%, and they're seeing 7% return on housing. So that's what you're competing against. But government has to take an active role in actually developing the first-time buyer market.
Jason Morehouse.
Yeah, housing's key. It's something that we all need to be aware of. But we also need to think about the alternatives to buying. There's a lot of people out there who do not want the responsibility of having a 40-year mortgage, whatever it may be. They want affordable, suitable, private sector accommodation, social housing, and we need to look at the range of property. But at the same time, first-time buyer houses need some form of protection, because at the moment there are too many investors, too many people going into that marketplace.
But how can you stop investors, Mr. Morehouse? How can you say that? Surely that's anti-competitive.
That is the issue. And in terms of if you try and come up with a solution, they'll come up with an alternative. So we've got to make sure there is a range of properties, and some of the properties are clearly for first-time buyers, and the assistance is there to ensure those individuals can afford those houses.
Tim Glover.
One of the things I'm pushing is that government should be a lot more strategic in its thinking. And if we go back to the current first-time buyer schemes that government has, they're reacting now too late, because the property market has already surged away. £313,000 was the average house at the end of December. We know it's a lot more than that come September now in 2021. They talk about 140 to 190,000 flats and 2-bedroom houses. Way out of kilter. Yes, they've announced that they're looking at it, but again, it's slow. It's not going to be brought in until April 2022. That's not helping anybody now. Government is too slow. It needs to think much more proactively and strategically, and should have been prepared for this spike. It was well known it was coming. You could only talk to estate agents last year. So it should be one of the first things that the new administration talks about, and nothing should be on or off the table.
Will, what's your response?
Really
I'll accept the comments, just to...
Why did you ask the question, Will?
Yeah, it was just really because you hear of properties being bought without even being looked at. You look at houses and they're being sold, and they're not even being looked at. And there's people, just businessmen, or I know for a fact, pension funds in the UK, they're just putting the money into that because it's easy money for them.
So do you think Tynwald should legislate against that?
Yeah, I think there should be some sort of restriction in the amount of houses. I think one of you said about the amount of houses you can buy before you end up paying more tax. Maybe that would deter it a little bit. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of the conversation we've had tonight is about housing, or it revolves around housing. I think this is this is where we need to sort out the housing issue.
Okay, thank you, Will. Anybody else
It's the
got a
biggest issue on the doorstep, without question.
question out there? There we are.
Hi, good evening, gentlemen. Mine's regarding to, we've had one of the candidates has referred to a possible mental health crisis in the future. It's actually now, the mental health crisis. It's not coming, it's already here. What I'd like to know from the candidates is, we haven't got an endless pot of money. We know there needs to be some action. How would they go about dealing with the current mental health crisis?
Steve
Which will
Crowther.
get worse.
Well, thank you. It's Jane, isn't it? Thank you, Jane. I think the key for me is that let's just have a look at this. Obviously, this cuts through most of society, particularly after the COVID period. And my own daughter faced a lot of challenges. She was in isolation for nearly 2 weeks at the beginning, the first lockdown. It was pretty devastating. Left her with panic attacks. We talked about it because we wanted to tell people about that. And fundamentally, the key here is how to, particularly on major issues that are influencing schools for me, mobile phone, peer pressure, social media. Let's have a look at real strategies to help deal with these issues, because it's preventative rather than just the cures that we need at the moment. Certainly we need investment in departments, and we need the right people to speak to channel people in the right direction. That for me is using the intelligence of the system rather than just, carte blanche approaches to, throwing money. That's not the answer for me.
Graham Crageen.
I think what we've got to do is we've got to front load the expenditure now, because the cost is going to be even greater in the future. So we have to do that.
What's this for? More mental health professionals?
We really need that. In education, sort of, there's three educational psychologists, and the amount of work that they have to deal with already, there needs to be more input in there. And we will have to find that money, because otherwise, if we do nothing, we will have a serious problem in the future. And it's about priorities, where we put our priorities. And that's got to be one of the key ones.
Jason Morehouse.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about this area. It's something that the faster the response, the better the outcomes. And it's particularly noticeable with young people. They're having to wait 18 months, 2 years. And for a child of 14 or 15 or younger, 2 years is a huge amount of time. And they're missing out on their education, on their family life, and key things. It must be a priority. Whoever gets in must really push out.
What do you say then to members of the older generation who just say you need to pull yourself together to man up? They went through the Second World War. They went through a depression on the Isle of Man. They went through an early part of life with no money. And how do you counter that?
I think that is something that people were saying earlier this year. I think the third lockdown really hit many people. Yeah. And I was surprised that the middle-aged, the older person was ringing me up in despair. And they, for the first time, actually saw that things were outside their control. And I think we're a lot more able to recognise these situations. Right. And I think it's not just the young people, it's older people that are also in this situation. And we need to respond.
You think there's a genuine mental health crisis?
Yeah, I think in terms of COVID, it just shifted everything further in that direction.
Tim Glover, would you use the word crisis?
Yes, I would. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg on this, and the indicators have been there long before COVID as well, with the shocking suicide rates that we've seen in recent years on the island. The evidence was there, nothing was done. This again is why government needs to be a lot more strategic. The answer at the moment, yes, they announced some more resource for the crisis team, because let's face it, you can't book a crisis for tomorrow. Tomorrow might never come. A crisis is a crisis. I think at the moment government needs to work with the third sector a lot more closely, because there are some excellent charities that are doing some excellent work within the mental health area. We need to go right to education as well, and we need to take away the stigma within schools about mental health. We need to give coping mechanisms, teach that within the schools to people. But we can do all of this, but again, unless you take this strategic approach to government, unless you deal with the causes of mental health issues, we're still going to have that crisis. Yep. So it is always about being a much more strategic and forward-looking thing. You deal with the issues that are there, and we've discussed some of them earlier tonight: affordable housing, poverty, addiction,
Jobs.
Yeah. Okay,
having jobs.
just a quick come back
It's a
on that,
list as
Jane.
long as your arm.
Yes, I do think that government can't afford to do everything on its own.
Okay, anyone else got a question for the candidates here as well? On the far side, your name is?
My name is Nadia. Good evening, and thank you so much.
Jolly good.
I just would like to raise a few points that I found paradox in, so I can talk about it forever, but I'm aware that we haven't got the time. So firstly, I really strongly agree with the lady, Sarah Jane, about the mental health crisis. I think that this actually started way before COVID, and I even tried to raise awareness around the suicide rates rising rapidly, and someone actually sent me a message saying you've got to shut up and just not say that. I mean, why?
Okay, what's your question?
So the question is that I've got young children in school, so one of them is both in Castletown in Victoria Road and in Castle Rushen. So I think that generally the children live in the island. One of the reasons is because they're not happy here to start with. There's a lot of bullying happening in schools, and I think that the morals at school are very low. Which is not really good enough, and I think that not much is being done around it. So, for example, my little daughter got kicked in the face and came back with a mark on her face, and I think that the children have a lot of anger issues due to many things. So I think that should be that there should be more things done in school to support mental health at early age and be addressed at early age, so they don't grow up into aggressive or depressed young people, like mindfulness, meditation, yoga.
Very good. Okay, well, we appreciate that question. I'll go to a former teacher about that. Something we picked up on Manninline when we go around the schools is bad behaviour amongst younger, not sixth formers, but amongst younger people, and bullying in schools.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that goes back to that lack of investment in terms of support within the classroom. Teachers have got bigger classes, it's more stressful. All the issues linked to COVID have put more pressure in that situation on the teachers, on the schools and the individuals. And I think it's one of those things that when the education bill was coming through, we said we need to just stop for a moment, take stock of the situation we're in, and really get to grips with what's happening in schools. I think that's so important.
But parents will want to know, how can you stop bullying?
I think all the time you need to be looking at that as an issue, whether it's one child or any number of children. It's got to be looked at, and solutions have got to be found. Definitely.
Okay, Graham Cragine, can teachers stop bullying in the class?
No, it's from teachers and back to the families, because you actually need the support of the families as well. So it's not just a case of, oh well, the teacher has to deal with this. The family has to support this, and like we said earlier, having those mental health professionals in there, educational psychologists, to try and help people to understand why they've got these issues. But it's across society, and Jason had said about the education bill. Well, one of the things that we've been talking in there was a social media policy. Now that's been put back years because it's not been brought forward, and that's what one of the unions had been asking for, was a social media policy to try and deal with those issues.
But there were so many unions, weren't there? 5 unions?
Yes.
I mean, and again, this comes back to the lady's daughter getting kicked in the face in a school in the south of the Isle of Man. I mean, this is the Isle of Man. That really shouldn't happen, should it?
No, and that's where they need to bring the parents in and the teachers and to talk to the families. And they need the support from there, because your child will be then worried about going back into school, so they need to deal with this properly.
Steve Crowther.
Can I just go back a step, please?
Can I
just ask? Just go for it. Was the incident actually reported to the school? Because I think that's quite an important one. Was the school
on multiple occasions? I've been through hell with my daughter because of trauma that we suffered, and she was put at the education support centre. She was got hurt there, so I had to pull her out. I wrote to Dr. Allinson himself about it, and it's been going on for years. So there's just now I've had a message from a friend of mine who said that her daughter is terrified of going back to same school in same class as mine, and another child from a next door class. Their parents have just removed her and gone to private education because of issues with bullying. I'm just feeling that because I did try to speak to the mother of the child that hurt my daughter as well, so she threatened me with police if I try to talk to her again about it.
Okay.
So she's not being cooperative at all.
Jolly good. Steve Crowther.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch your first name because I can't hear behind here.
Nadia, I just wanted to say one thing, that I think that something could be done at school.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Nadia. So it's Nadia.
Nadia. I was going to name my little daughter Nadia when she was young. Right, just
An omen.
Yeah, it is an absolute omen. The key thing here for me is going back again. It's really looking at prevention, and we've got to start a lot earlier. You see, this is why I have to focus on our chief constables told us that we have a serious drugs issue in our schools, and that's also combining with a lot of key issues, particularly mental health. But if you just have a look at particularly, I can talk about kids when they get to secondary school, but let's just have a look at 14 to 18. You know, we took away a lot of things. They can't go in bars at 16, fair enough. You know, there's a lot of, they can go in bars, but there's restrictions. And there's a lot of other issues that we've taken away, arcades, good thing. But the problem is we didn't give them anything else to do. And that's the key area that we need to focus on. But coming back to secondary school, we need a strong strategy about the mobile phone, peer pressure and social media. Graham's mentioned aspects of legislation, good. But what I'm saying is it needs a grown-up strategic view as to how we're going to go forward.
Okay, all right, we're going to leave that there.
Can I answer that?
Very quickly.
Thank you. On the point you're making, Graham's mentioned the education bill. It was rightly withdrawn from Tynwald because it just wasn't fit for purpose, and that was coming from teachers and everybody else. There is a reluctance from schools to actually suspend transgressors at the moment, which...
Do you know that for a fact?
Yes, I do. If you talk to any parents on the doorstep, they are telling you there's not even a 1, 2 or 3 strike. There's a real reluctance to actually take action, and I think that needs to change.
Okay, any more questions from the audience here at the Viking? Yes? Your name, sir?
My name's Jeff. All candidates say the same thing. They've all got proposals to create an economy, but they don't say how. Attract business from UK or Germany or France, don't say how. Mental health, refugees, Manx radio subsidy, it's all got to be paid for. There's an economy dying in the Isle of Man. What are you going to do to attract business to come here? Whether it's a tax rate, not 15%, what are you going to do to attract business to come here, set up here?
Do you think the Isle of Man economy is dying?
Yeah. It's died. It's died.
Okay, Jason Morehouse.
I think it's a key priority actually to look at the economy to ensure there are jobs, there are also the opportunities. I think the biggest issue that overriding is the size of the government. At the moment it's taking some of the young, the best skilled, the most ambitious people, and those will be so much better in the private
government
sector.
was supposed to get smaller, it's got bigger.
And that is the problem, and that's something I brought to Tynwald in June, and the motion was successful, it's coming back in January. But yeah, we really actually need to shrink government back and get the government working within its means, because at the moment they're borrowing money, they're looking at a whole new range of things. In terms of the private businesses coming, they're wanting to come here, they want to do business. It's making sure there aren't too many regulations and too many restrictions and red tape on them.
What's stopping businesses coming then?
I think that they are coming, but the issue is once they're here, it's ensuring that they can do business and get things done. There are lots of restrictions, and we're not good with a follow-up.
Tim Glover, Jeff just said, you know, politicians will say things. You said you don't want to make a load of promises that you can't keep. So what do you think about the economy? How can...
Nobody can make any promises here apart from to work hard. That's the only promise you can make when we don't have a political system here, a party political system. There's a lot of things that can help. Government needs to be a lot more flexible. I talked about this production company that's wanting to bring 100 jobs to the island. The only reason those 100 jobs aren't coming to the island, which will help boost the economy, is the clunkiness and the slowness of government. It needs to be a lot smarter and a lot slimmer and a lot more effective in dealing with things. And we also need to stop wasting money. Let's look at the flip side of that. We're wasting long millions on schemes like Douglas Promenade that's overrunning, like the Liverpool landing stage, which is why I support this central idea of taking the capital projects off departments and controlling it with professionals elsewhere.
The issue that you've got is that to attract companies over here, unemployment is so low, so then they have to bring people over with them. Then they need houses to go into. So you've got that cycle that you need houses to put people in. The house prices are so expensive, then it puts it up. It's going this vicious cycle of trying to attract them in and having the people here, which we've got that issue with. The other one that we have is, and Tim's right, the Department of Enterprise has been really clunky. It's dreadfully slow at times. And what we need is that to put some vitality in it and make sure that the people in that department can go out.
Okay, very
and sell
quickly,
it-
Steve
sell the
Crowther.
island.
Thank you, Jeff. I think I mentioned this the other day. The key thing here is making sure that we have a clear vision of what we want to do. We're talking about a joint venture. That's the other aspect. Making sure that we can work with private enterprise. Looking at investment, some of the key issues in the UK at the current time are that the UK government is investing heavily in small business. Their mantra is productivity. You're absolutely right. We are going to face challenges to attract people with work permits and other issues. But let me come to the fundamental.
Quickly.
We need a focusing government that's joined up, that's clear as to where we want to go. There's a good quality of life that we experienced in part of the COVID period. That's what we need to project.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, each candidate will now have 1 minute to address you, the electorate. We'll start with Jason Morehouse.
From my perspective, the strength and growth of the local economy is and must be a priority. Without this, young people will not return home, businesses will not succeed, and we'll all be worse off. Economic success will ensure that there can be better investment in things like mental health, there will be better investment in education, and a new school at Castle Rushen will be built. Over the last 5 years, I've been an active community MHK. I've got out there, I've met people, and I've tried to take things forward. I've been an approachable person who is always there, an important link between local people and national government. I am someone who gets things done and at the same time prepared to say no when I feel it's wrong, as was the case with the £400 million bond. Over the last 5 years, I've been one of the most active MHKs in terms of asking parliamentary questions, in terms of bringing motions and getting things done.
Okay, Graham Cragine.
I think from my years of experience in Tynwald that I've got a proven record of actually achievement. It's not just a case of standing by the sidelines and throwing stones. It's actually about what you can actually say that you've achieved in that time. And during that time, yes, I've had motions to Tynwald regarding Crosswick Farm, about planning, about developments, and also as part of my time in the Public Accounts Committee when you're reviewing these schemes. But I think going forward, the next administration is going to need people with experience of actually a record of achievement, because they're the ones who's going to have to get on with the real work of government, of protecting the island, its people and in its economy. And with that, I hope the people of Arbory, Castletown and Malew will see from what I have achieved over my time in Tynwald that I have been good for my word. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Crowther.
Go.
Thank you. Look, what we've heard here today is, I've done things and I'm doing things, but when we actually look at the constituency, nothing's delivered. The school, the ATG, which I'd like a climate change technology research. We're the same with the housing. The Castletown housing has been buried pretty well. Yes, we have got some housing, no first-time buyer. I have a solution to these challenges. And the same with the school. As an architect, I know that we can move this forward much more quickly. These are the essentials. We need the investment, we need the creativity, and we need the long-term vision that will take us forward. It's really essential now, if I'm given the honour of being elected, that somebody finally delivers for this constituency. Thank you.
And finally, Tim Glover.
I think it's a good opportunity to press the reset button. We need a fresh approach. We need 2 MHKs for Arbory, Castletown and Malew who are working together, which they haven't been, working together for the good of this constituency and the good of the island. They give more weight than to the cases that are bringing forward. I think the Isle of Man government needs to take a far more strategic approach to all solutions, whether they be local or indeed big national issues. A strategic approach with some forward thinking. Let's have some confidence in government. Let's get rid of the waste. Let's take this as an opportunity to really move forward, and hopefully in 5 years' time we'll feel a bit better than we do currently. It's my time as a commentator. I want to come to an end. I think it's time to become an active player on the pitch for your team.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I only have one piece of advice for you, the gathered multitude here at the Viking, and if you're a constituency, a constituent in Arbory, Castletown, Malew, that is just to think very deeply about when you cast your vote 3 weeks tomorrow. The House of Keys general election is 3 weeks tomorrow, the 23rd. This has been our first debate, and I thank everyone at the Viking and the enormous production team that we've had here as well. Tomorrow night we're going to be live at the Ginger Hall in Sulby. It will be packed because there are umpteen candidates, and we're hoping to get round to everyone. So I thank you for if you're listening to this as a podcast or watching the video somewhere, anywhere in the world, anytime, day or night, as an exiled Manxie, we thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Viking in Castletown, I'm Andy Wint. Thanks to Ben Hartley, to Beth Espy, to Andrew Beasley, to all the assembled multitude, and Matty Cunningham as well. Thank you for being with us. Good night.